Hi, this is Stephen, and this is Astro Indicator Update, episode 59, and today's date is August 30th. And today we are going to look at some charts. In particular, we're going to look at, we just had what's called a station of Uranus, and all the planets, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but periodically all the planets appear to stop and change direction in the sky. And during the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days where that's in effect, depending on the planet, that can have some effect on our lives and on markets and so forth. And so I'm going to demonstrate that and look at some markets very recently, because we had a Uranus station over the last few days, which is still active. So we'll look at the gold, Bitcoin, the US dollar, and the Dow. And then I wanted to look at Joe Biden, the big guy's transits, because potentially when Congress reconvenes in about a week, there could be some activity or some motion to try to impeach him. So I wanted to look at his transits. And then in my last episode, we looked at the trading alliance, the world trading alliance that's called BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They just had a very important meeting, which is not on a lot of people's radar. But increasingly, this is going to become an important economic factor in the world. And I did a chart on it in my last episode. And then I want to touch upon, I do personal astrology consultations for the general public and for investors, traders, and I want to emphasize that, and also my website, which is astroindicator.com. Okay, so this is sort of an interesting place to start, but this is from a Zero Hedge article, and it's just a general comment that yesterday, the economic reports that came out on the 29th of August were very surprising, mostly to the downside, whether it was the jobs report or housing or whatever. Many revisions, past revisions, were to the downside, and so the markets responded to this. Well, over the last few podcasts, or not podcasts, last few posts that I've had with my astroindicator.com, I've said it's likely something's going to happen around the 29th of August, because we have a Uranus station. And what are some of the key words for Uranus at any level, individual, global, financial, is that oftentimes unpredictable, surprising, sometimes shocking things can take place. And this is exactly what's happened yesterday in the financial markets, and I'll kind of get into that. The Dow went up because the reports indicate that the Federal Reserve may not continue raising interest rates as radically or as continuously as they have, and that's generally sort of good for the Dow Jones. But there's only so far they can construe bad news as being good. So labor market implodes. This is from yesterday. Job openings crater. Prior data unexpectedly, a Uranian keyword, revised sharply lower. And down here, read the last line. In July, there were just 8 million job openings, the first sub-9 million print since March 21. It is also the third biggest miss on record. So undoubtedly, we had big surprises taking place on a Uranus station. It didn't surprise me, but I'd been noting this on my website for some time. Now, my website, I have specific days I pinpoint where I think market moves are going to take place. And then this is from my website, I indicated this Uranus station by this white line that was a general date that I thought was going to affect many markets, particularly markets that were oversold or overbought. And this is gold. And gold has been going up over the last few weeks. I had indicated by this gold this yellow goldish colored horizontal line, that's when I thought a bullish move would start, and indeed it did start there. And when we hit the Uranus station, we got an extenuation of this rally that's taking place. And in particular, it went through this 50-day moving average, which is usually significant. And it's got last 2 days, it's gone through this trend line. So these are technical indicators that I'm pointing out here. And normally, when traders and active investors see this, they see, oh, this market is likely going higher. And I believe that's true because we have an additional historically bullish key dates, astro dates coming up, which I note on my website. And my website is a subscription-based website for $5 a month, but I usually kind of note when these key dates occur about a month and a half into the future for each specific market that I cover. So this is just, again, this is something happened yesterday and gold responded to it. And here we were looking at silver. Silver and gold are interrelated. If one moves, the other moves. And so when gold had that strong bullish double line that we just looked at, silver responded to it as well. In addition, it was hitting a support level. Now we have a double bottom here, which is usually a very good sign that the market has established a base and it's going to rally. Yesterday on this white line, the Uranus station line, we had a big move in silver, and it too has broken this downtrend line, which from a technical trader standpoint, it points to things continuing higher. And so I wanted to kind of illustrate that silver responded to yesterday's energy as well. Bitcoin. Bitcoin had a big day. And it too had a surprising news come out. I don't know why it was that surprising, but everybody kind of was flat-footed on some news of a court case that was taking place between the Securities and Exchange Commission and a court proceeding with a fund called Grayscale that happened yesterday. And when that judgment came out, it was basically in favor of Bitcoin. I won't go into the details, but Bitcoin was up like about 7% yesterday. You can see it on that white line, pulling back a little bit. Some people taking a little profits, but this is, very, very good news for Bitcoin. And this is what I'm talking about. This is the Grayscale Bitcoin Fund, and they want to change their fund into what's called an exchange-traded fund, so it's more easily accessible to the general public. And when this court announcement came out, it was strongly in favor of Grayscale. It said the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, their past rulings were without merit. Basically, they were what do they call it? They were arbitrary and capricious. And so that was pretty strong. And so all the judges that were involved in this court case, they all sided with Grayscale and said, yes, you can change your fund into an ETF, and that's lining up. Many other companies want to have a Bitcoin ETF, which will make it much simpler for investors to invest in Bitcoin. Much more money is going to come into Bitcoin, and this fund was up like nearly 20% yesterday. Again, I knew something was going to happen. I indicated this on my website. So just a couple more examples here. Bitcoin spikes after ETF court ruling. I don't know why people were so flat-footed with this. I mean, I knew it could have had very significant ramifications if it came out in Grayscale's favor. But boy, it caught everybody by surprise. So here's the Dow Jones. Now, we had really bad economic reports come out yesterday, but because that implies that the Federal Reserve will slow down or stop raising interest rates. Then we have the Dow Jones likes that news, and so it went up. However, the Dow Jones right now is bumping up against this trend line, this white trend line, and it's forming what appears to be a very large, what's called a head and shoulders formation. So this could be really a major stopping point, resistance in the rally in the Dow. And I think maybe just in a couple of days the Dow could start turning down, because it doesn't have a real historically bullish date until you get into October. So the next month in the Dow could be kind of dicey in my book. So consider subscribing, and you can kind of get the latest on my forecast. Because I don't think astrology, again, I'll just make a quick point here, astrology in the financial analytical realm is a supplement to other ways of analyzing things. But I think it's an important supplement. And so, it gets a bad rap. But astrology's been in the financial world for 100 years, and it just kind of flies under the radar. Okay, one last one. So the US dollar, it too, that when this surprising, unexpected, shocking, joltish news came out, the dollar started tanking. And because Bitcoin and the precious metals often go in opposite directions, you see the dollar dropping. And this is approximately where it is midday today on Wednesday, August 30th. So yesterday was a pretty major, significant day. So let's look at Joe Biden here for a second. Because the Republicans may want to advance impeachment measures when they start meeting again next week. And I'll just briefly go over this. But Joe has some difficult things in his chart. And when you add them up, a very stressful time for him is sort of the bottom line, which could be reflected in these, in this attempt to impeach him. But right off the bat, you can see. Let's see if I can get my drawing tool operating here. Right off the bat, you have the transit of Saturn. In the outer ring, we have the transits. At 3 degrees Pisces is squaring his ascendant. Okay, strong Saturn energy going on of limitations, restrictions, things not working out the way you want them to, feeling in the dumps, and so forth. So what's the context here? That's always the question in astrology. What's the context? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about your dog, or are we talking about the President of the United States? Okay. Well, I think this relates to relates to what's could be coming up for him. So what else is going on? We have Uranus opposite the Sun. And so here's a Uranus transit. This is where it just stationed. It just, the red here means it's going retrograde just very recently. And so what do we have going on in let's see, why isn't this working here? Here we go. And oh, I just screwed up. So listen, hang on. I just hit the wrong button. Let's see if I can go backwards here once. Okay, we get the show going on here, and okay, so there we go. We basically have an opposition of this Uranus transit opposite his Sun. So, this is hanging in there, and the Sun has a wide orb. Even though one says 23 and one says 27, it's still affecting him. So Joe could have something surprising come up in his life that he hadn't been anticipating. It's out there, these impeachment proceedings, but maybe he's in denial about it. And so suddenly it may be put front and center in his life, and he'll have to deal with it. And at least that's how I'm interpreting this. That suddenly something concrete may be taking place in that area. And so let's move on. And we have an opposite Jupiter-Mars. I won't draw it in, but this may be giving him a false sense of confidence. This opposition, Jupiter to his Mars, okay? And, you know, it kind of has a sort of a macho energy, this transit of overconfidence could be, and it's not a great aspect if you're president, and particularly when there's wars going on in the world, because this could inflame and expand that sort of energy. So something to watch out for in that. But also he's got a couple Pluto things going on which are very difficult. So he's got Pluto transit right here, and this is going to last well into most of next year, okay? And this has, on the level of health, on the level of things just falling apart in one's life, feeling like things are being undermined, disintegration essentially on a number of levels. And you know, there's definitely, this is one of the more emotionally intense energies that you can have, is this Pluto moon, either conjunction, opposition, square, and he's got that, and it's going to hang in there for a good while. And on top of that, he's got I'm not going to show it, but in the declinations, another way of getting clarity on a time period besides transits. Again, this is Joe's natal. I didn't say this. This is Joe's natal chart in the middle, and we have the position of the planets in the sky right now by transit out here. But in addition to that, what are called declinations also give you an idea of the character and quality of a time period. And he is approaching a Pluto-Pluto declination. And so, you know, there's another level of Pluto intensity, sense of crisis, things kind of falling apart. And you know, and if someone's not 80 years old and they're 25 and this happens, then usually a rebirth and a renewal takes place down the line. But it takes time to reach that point. And when you have combined stressful things like this, for anybody, it's a very difficult period. So we'll see what happens here with Joe. So I wanted to review this BRICS meeting, and this may not be on most people's radar unless you're really into economics and financial system and so forth. So I attempted to see what might come out of BRICS by looking at the beginning date of that chart. And so this is August 22nd, last Tuesday, it lasted for several days. And I won't spend a lot of time with this, but we had a Uranus Sun square, so I knew again that I've been talking about Uranus. I knew something, a change was going to come about in the direction and purpose of this alliance, this trading alliance. Something new, something unusual was going to occur. And then we had a Venus square Jupiter, which was sort of money and banking and that financial thing. There was real energy, but it was a square. And so, squares can either manifest as overt action and results occurring, or it can indicate where there is some difficulty in manifesting change in that area. And then we had a grand trine of Uranus, Mars, Pluto in the chart. And I see that having occurred. There was action taken to expand the number of countries within this trading group. It went from 5 to 11. And there's strength in numbers, okay? And as this group grows, they have much more clout in the world economy, and whether it's trading with each other outside of the U.S. dollar, which right now, over the last 50 years, they've had to use the U.S. dollar frequently to buy oil and so forth, but now this is all changing. And increasingly, the countries that are joining BRICS are oil-producing countries. We had, Russia, but now we have Saudi Arabia and United what is it? United Arab Emirates, and potentially next year we'll have Venezuela and Algeria. This is a big deal. And so this combination, this grand trine between these planets does represent strengthening of their empowerment in the world. And this is what I noted, in my last episode. We have Pluto square the moon, just like Joe Biden. So what could that mean? Well, on this level, I think there were backroom secretive dealings that the public just does not know about. And so I'm kind of hanging my hat on that interpretation here, is that there were, behind the scene things going on here. And so that could be how that's interpreted. And finally, we had Saturn opposite the sun, and I said, well, in conjunction with the square of Uranus, okay, probably this had, maybe it could represent just their attempt to gain greater stability and security in their operations and so forth. Well, in reality, which is a Saturn term, it probably indicated there's some degree of cautiousness in how they handled their proceedings, and that's a Saturn turn. So they weren't as aggressive in advancing some of their plans as some people had hoped or had predicted or whatever. So the Saturn was a degree of caution. They emphasized longer-term organization, and I personally think that the news was much more, this expansion of 6 additional countries is much more significant than the media is making out. And one person who writes about this topic, because he's an expert in China and Asia and Russia, is an independent journalist called Pepe Escobar. And this is, if you did a search, BRICS, which he is calling BRICS 11 now, Strategic Tour de Force. Okay, read this article because he lays it out, and he says, they're mapping out a plan to have, maybe 20 countries in this trading bloc by this time next year. A couple years after that, they may have 40. And when you get to 20, you're talking about a trading alliance that is controlling 80% of the world's energy, okay? And has far more composite collective GDP than the G7, which the U.S. is in. And why are they doing this? Is that they want to be independent and cut themselves loose from the control the United States has had over the economies of the world for the last 50 years, with the U.S. dollar reserve as the reserve currency, with the IMF and whatnot. And so they're just setting up their own system, trading between each other. And it essentially is like to be kind of coarse about it, it's a big sort of middle finger to the U.S. And I understand why, to be frank. So astrologically, let me kind of revise what I had done a week ago. This Uranus square the sun, it still represents a radical shift, a radical change, which is a Uranus word. This Venus square Jupiter, well, the common trading currency was delayed. Here, that square, really didn't deliver on something that was predicted, which would have been maybe a gold-backed trading currency, and it was moved ahead. Again, this grand trine, which I won't draw right now, just expanded their power base, indeed, adding 6 countries. And the 6 countries was Iran, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, the UAE, I'm missing one, Egypt. Okay. They just genuinely expanded their power base. And I mentioned, I think, the Pluto square moon. Again, I think it more or less represented these backroom deals. And I'm repeating myself, but here's the Saturn opposite the sun. Rather than being a disappointment, that they didn't do more. I think maybe it expressed, more the Saturnian kind of pragmatism. And they're being, slow but pragmatic and, thoughtful in their expansion. And so anyway, I wanted to touch on this. You got to keep track, if you're into economics or the financial system, you got to keep track of what's going on in the world with regard to BRICS, whether it's BRICS 11 this year or BRICS 20 or whatever, but their strength is increasing, no doubt. So anyway, that's it for today. Again, my name is Stephen. I've been researching financial astrology for 25 years. I have a master's degree in transpersonal psychology. I do individual astrology consultations for $150. You can contact me at astroindicator at gmail.com. This is my website. It's $5 a month. I track 5 markets: gold, silver, Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe 6, US dollar, and the Dow. It's a bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks I post these astro dates and try to incorporate them into more traditional analytical tools. And I accept Bitcoin donations. So there you go. But thank you for listening. Thank you for checking me out. Please subscribe if you liked what you heard, if you're into astrology or finance or forecasting. And if you want to be notified, then follow through with that procedure. But anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll probably be back in 2 or 3 weeks. Bye for now.